All right, we are back with The Dark Knight Lecture 2, and I am very, very excited for this lecture. If you haven't seen Lecture 1, it's going to be up there. If you're ready for Lecture 2, well, it starts with this right here. It starts with the Joker. It starts with this crazy freaking face. Like imagine having to deal with something like that. I wanted to start it off by really, I guess summarizing the last part, but also, getting an idea for what the Joker actually is and what we're actually dealing with here. Right here it was just a little detail in the movie, but you have, literally, you have a fire truck on fire. Right, this was as they were going into the bridge when they were trying to transfer Harvey Dent. They were so crazy that they're able to overthrow the system. They're able to cause that much chaos that they put a fire truck on fire. This is the stuff that the Joker is gonna do, and this is really the embodiment of what the Joker is. So, to get an idea of what he is again, and this is actually sort of expanding on where he was before. His ideology, his way of thinking is everything burns. Everything burns. No matter what you have, you could try to establish whatever systems, whatever principles, whatever plans, whatever strategies, whatever you want to do, it's gonna burn. It's gonna end up in flames, and it's gonna end up. What does burning do? It ends up as nothing. Everything that you're gonna try ends up as nothing, and this is the fundamental problem that we see across every single civilization, structure, plan that we've ever tried to create ever. Right? We try to establish democracy. Right? What happens? It all crashes down. Right? And that was the 20th century, for example. What you try to establish, you try to start working out more. What happens? It collapses into nothing. You try to establish whatever, right? A solid relationship, a solid family structure, a solid system of communication between people, right? That's what a business is. Just they collapse completely. You watch the political example that we're struggling with right now. It's like everything burns. The whole problem that everyone is struggling with is we try to establish systems, but there's this interactive force that acts within everything that tries to tear that system down, and that is the representation of the Joker. He doesn't care about he doesn't care about anything, right? Like you see in the background, what is he doing here, right? He's burning money, right? This is probably like something like $1 trillion, something like a few $100 billion, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the system. He doesn't care about your structure. He doesn't care about what's best for everybody. He just wants everything to burn. And well, the question is, does that lie within us? And the answer is obviously yes, right? If you look deep enough, there is something like that lies within you. And, we could say that maybe that's the representation of the devil, but that's not enough, right? It's like, why is it that you try to establish, you try to start going to the gym, you try to start eating healthy, you try to quit smoking, like all these things try to happen and you establish these systems, and then something within you just ends up breaking down, right? And we like to say, this is a good way of looking at it, you like to say that you fell off the wagon, right? Or you like to say that, that's something that you... Well, okay, so we'll go with falling off the wagon. You try to say that you were the one who actively fell off the wagon, but it's not completely correct. What's really happening is someone like the Joker is grabbing you and pulling you off the wagon, because we sort of have this illusion that we're in control, right? We're the ones who decided that we were going to stop working out, and we try to rationalize, we try to justify whatever we try to do, but really, or maybe you could say, maybe we could open ourselves to the possibility that maybe it wasn't us that was acting. Maybe it wasn't the you that you know. Maybe that person wasn't acting. Maybe there's this little Joker character that exists within you that just says, oh yeah, you want to establish a system, you want to be rational, you want to do all this stuff, you want to pursue your goals, I don't care about that. I'm just going to destroy. And well, that's the Joker, right? That's the Joker. And I won't get into that. So that's the Joker. And so here's his goal, right? Everything has a goal, and there's something that he's trying to do, and we got to figure out what is he trying to do. And this is something that came in at the end, but it's the perfect understanding of what his goal is. And here's what he says. He says, "I took Gotham's White Knight, which is Harvey Dent, and I brought him down to our level." And then he says the words, "Madness is like gravity. All it takes is a little push." And this is the idea that we're going to be exploring throughout this entire lecture and throughout this entire lecture series is, why is it that when we try to establish a goal, it feels like we are always on the verge of failure? Always, right? Like, you imagine. So let's see if I could come up with a good example. Actually, here was a very, very good example. So, I've been doing these lecture series, and I've been doing, obviously, a lot of reading has to go along with it, and along with that, you have to have a good sleep schedule. You can't really just be sort of operating on all hours of the day. It doesn't really work like that, especially, I guess, for me too. So I have that going on, and then I have to be doing schoolwork. I have to be doing like a bunch of different things. I have to be constantly learning, also managing relationships. There's a lot of structure that I have built in, and there was one point along this, maybe about a month ago, where I was, it was funny because everything was going perfectly. The lectures were going really well. I was getting a lot from my readings. My sleep schedule was really on point. It's not like I was waking up at 8 one day and then waking up at 11 a.m. and then 1 p.m. like the next day. Everything was going really well. And I asked myself, things are going really well. Why? It never goes this well. Like, it shouldn't be going this well. What is going on? And sure enough, about a week later, everything sort of collapsed, right? Everything sort of collapsed. I got a little complacent, started waking up at like maybe, instead of 8 a.m., started waking up at like 9, 10, 11, some of my lectures didn't go as well, didn't prepare for them as much, like all these things started to happen, and everything started to fall apart. And you ask the question, why, while I was doing well, we'll go with the general example, while the New Year's resolution was going perfect, like you're going to the gym, you're eating healthy, everything feels good, why do you feel like you're always on the verge of chaos? And why is that always true? Why do we always end up failing after that? Why do 92% of people, when trying to strive for a New Year's resolution or some sort of goal, fail? We don't really have a great explanation for that. The best thing we could do is sort of conceptualize in this character of the Joker, and that's the idea of gravity. When he says madness is like gravity, or failure is like gravity, more generally, it's sort of saying that we could try to hold up these systems, but these systems are merely temporary. They're merely, well, maybe temporary is the wrong word, because people are able to do it successfully, and that's maybe what a hero does. But the problem is that they fall so easily. It's so easy to break your habits. It's so easy to fail that it almost seems like you're always standing on a bad foundation. It's like you're always on a boat, and that boat is always has the chance of sinking, and we don't really know why, so we're going to do the best that we can, and we're going to conceptualize it in the Joker. Now, I'll explain to you what the typical person goes through, because, as I said, 92% of people, as we try to strive for our goals, we fail. You have this character right here. This character, the Joker was waiting in his holding cell, right? He was in prison, and this guy was standing guard, and this guy knew that that he should not mess with the Joker. He shouldn't try to, quote, teach him a lesson, right? He shouldn't try to beat him up. He should just stand guard and not cause any problems. Just do his job. And what does the Joker do? The Joker manipulates him. He gets his ego involved, and once he gets his ego involved, this guy cracks, right? He cracks. The small foundation that he was standing on collapses. Now, you have Ramirez. Ramirez is the same character, right? She was talking about her mother's hospital bills. What did she do? She collapsed. The foundation that she was standing upon, and we could say this foundation is so strong, like so vital. It's like principles, morals, structure, goals. Like these 4 things are the things that give us meaning, make our lives important. Relationships, that's another one, that make our lives strong, right? And and the harsh reality is that sometimes it's on a weak foundation, and that all you have to do, you could imagine we're standing, I like to use, actually it's the Bruce Wayne example, you're standing on top of a well, and you have this chance of falling into the well, and the only thing that's holding you up is wood, right? Is the ground, right? And it's a question of how strong is your ground. So the Joker is making the case that the ground that we're standing on isn't even wood, it's like a carpet, and all you have to do is sort of like move a little bit and you fall right down into the well. That's what Ramirez is. And that's God, it's a question of like, is that the case in literally every single thing that we do ever? You try to establish anything, any positive goal that you try to establish, let's say an intimate relationship, you try to establish an intimate relationship, there are about 500 things that are ready to tear you down. And, there are a few ways to go right, but there's also 500 things ready to tear you down. And the question is, what do you do about that? Maybe the first thing is you conceptualize it as the Joker, and then the second thing is you have to, go through exactly what Batman does. And this is exactly what this lecture is going to be about, and this is exactly what you're going to have to go through in every single thing that you do. So first I wanted to caveat this with the traditional way, or the non-traditional way of looking at it, but this is probably the strongest way that I've seen in terms of establishing some sort of goal structure. So I figured this out in my Moana lecture, and this was one of the strong principles that really makes goals, for me, it makes my goals so much easier, just a tremendous amount easier. And it's summarized in this idea in Moana. So the main idea in Moana, I made a whole lecture series on this, but here's the main point. The main point in Moana is that humans have this fundamental flaw. Our fundamental flaw is that whenever it's actually the opposite lesson of Batman, which is of the Dark Knight, which is really funny. So the fundamental flaw is that whenever we have to get into a fight with our unconscious, or we could say the dragon of chaos, or we could say the Joker, right? Whenever we try to, I'll give a just regular example, right? Whenever you try to go to the gym and you're trying to fight off the lazy part of you, right? The part of you that wants to sit on the couch. Whenever you get into this fight, we decide to violently overtake it. We decide to fight it, right? We're going for an actual battle. And that's what the representation of this is, right? You have this little hero over here fighting against the giant dragon of chaos, you could say, or the giant Joker, right? And he fails. The hero fails. And this is a good representation of every single person as you try to do a New Year's resolution. You realize that you're inadequate, right? You realize that, okay, maybe I need to make a change. You say, the animal part of me, or we'll say, we'll say the animal part of me has had its way with me. It's been it's had too much of an influence on my life. I've been spending, 3 hours sitting on the couch doing whatever. And, well, of course, that's my animal impulses wanting me to go and lay down, right? That's the Garfield instinct, I could say. But my animal instincts have been going too far. I'm going to fight them, right? This is what we say. We say I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to, for example, go to the gym, right? So in this period of, transitioning, hopefully, right, or achieving your goal, you have to get into a fight with that Garfield instinct. That Garfield instinct is going to say, wait a second, I used to spend 3 hours a day sitting on the couch doing nothing. Now I'm only spending 1 hour a day, right? And that's in like the first week, right? And it says, what's going on here? And then you get a little kickback, you get a little relapse, you get a little trouble, right? And that's the fight that must go on here. And the question is, what do you do about that? Because you're going to have that fight. You're going to have to face this Joker. You're going to have to face this animal part of you. And the question is, how do you handle that? The answer that Moana offered is that you don't fight it. The answer that Moana offered is they say, wait a second. You spend 3 hours a day hanging out on the couch, right? And we'll say satisfying your need for laziness, because we have a need for laziness, and maybe that needs to be fulfilled, right? Even though we look at it as bad, maybe if instead of spending 3 hours a day, maybe you spend, 3 hours a week doing it. It's really not that bad. It's not that detrimental. So you could say maybe instead of fighting this instinct, we could integrate it into our daily lives, and we could just integrate it in a better way. We could let it express itself a little bit, but it doesn't have to express itself in terms of 3 hours a day, And that's the idea that Moana goes into. They essentially say, stop fighting yourself, right? Instead of doing 3 hours a day, right? Instead of going from 3 hours a day of hanging out on the couch to 1 hour a day, just go from 3 hours a day to 2.5 hours, or 3 hours a day to 2 hours, and gradually go through a sort of transition, right? Where your Garfield instinct, right, or your animal instinct can express itself just in a better way, just in a smaller way, and you could make that so much easier. And you could see this within yourself. You could see this tomorrow. Wake up. I don't care what you've been doing in the past. Look up Arnold Schwarzenegger's workout plan, right, and try to do it for the next week, or try to do it for the next month, and see if you could actually do it. See if it's actually possible that you could do it. And you're going to find that that's almost impossible, right? Like how would you be able to work out like 4 hours a day and doing all the crazy stuff that he did? And the reason is because he was able to, it took him years after years after years to develop these habits, to develop these, we'll say, animalistic impulses that push him towards working out. And for you to say that, oh yeah, I'm just gonna fight my unconscious, I'm just gonna fight all the instincts that I've already had and just start working out 4 hours a day, you're just gonna completely collapse. I've done this many times in the past before. One of my biggest problems throughout high school is that I would be super lazy, right? Like whatever it was, not doing schoolwork, not working out, whatever, and usually all of them combined. And then it would be about 11 o'clock at night, and I'd be sitting there, and I'd say, okay, tomorrow I am going to fix all of it. I'm going to fix all of it, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to change my life for the better. So tomorrow I'm going to get up, and I'm going to do a 1 hour workout, and then I'm going to work for a few hours. We'll say 3 hours more than I usually do. And then I'm going to read, then I'm going to do some more reading, and then I'm going to, what was the other thing that I was really into? Oh yeah, then I'm going to go to sleep early, right? These are the 4 things that I really struggle with. And I said I'm going to do them all, and I'm going to plan out my day, I'm going to do everything like that, I'm going to get it done, I'm going to fight my unconscious. That's essentially what I said. and I'm going to fight that animalistic impulse that has been expressing itself, the Garfield instinct. And then what did I do? The next morning I'd get up. I wouldn't do any of it. Why? My animal brain is telling me, right? I am in control. I have been in control. You want me to start working? You want me to do 10 things that I haven't been doing before? And it just never worked out. And then I ended up spending my day, usually on Instagram, usually on TikTok, something like that. So the answer here, right? The answer here is not the answer that Moana offered. Is if you don't have to fight your unconscious, don't work with it. Try to establish some sort of negotiation technique. This is what Jordan Peterson says. He says if you usually work, we'll say 2 hours a day, whatever, right? 2 hours in your 16-hour waking experience. Don't say, if you plan out your day tomorrow and you say you want to improve, go from 2 to 2.5. Don't go from 2 to 5. Don't go from 2 to 10, right? Just add little improvements so that you could work with yourself so you can negotiate with yourself. He said, ask yourself the question, what was the question? Oh, yes. Is this a day that I'd actually like to have? That's a good question, right? Because what I'd used to do is I used to say, okay, I'm going to work 14 hours today. And who really wants to work 14 hours? It's a miserable life. So the answer here is negotiation. But in Batman, where we're going to be in The Dark Knight, we're going to be figuring out, okay, you have this Joker character and you can't work with it. You can't work with it because, well, the unfortunate reality is every single time that you are going to set a goal, right, you're going to have to fight against your unconscious. Every single time. You're going to have to fight against some animalistic impulse or something like that. We'll generalize and say you're going to have to fight against some animalistic impulse every single time. I've been working with a lot of love stories recently, right? Romance, because obviously intimate relationships is like the thing that humans understand the most. So you ask the question, it's like, especially for men, right? What is the thing that you must fight against if you want to establish an intimate relationship? You must fight the desire for sex, right? This is the primary thing that men must fight against. They must figure out, okay, I have this strong desire for sex. I have this strong desire just to, have essentially a one-night stand. But I need to get into a mature, intimate relationship. What do I have to do? I have to fight this animalistic desire for sex, right? And that's just a basic representation, right? You want to go to the gym, same thing. You have to fight this animalistic desire to conserve energy. You want to eat healthier, you have to fight this animalistic desire for pleasure. Every single time there's this thing that you must fight against, and the question is, if you can't, well, if you ever set yourself on a goal, you're going to have to do this. And the thing is, what do you do about it? So the answer that Moana offered would say that you have to bring it down as much as you possibly can, right? You have to bring as little strenuousness as possible, right? Don't stress yourself out too much, and then endure. So, well, that's really the example. So it's like you're working 2 hours, right? If you're working 2 hours, don't go to 5, stay with 2.5. And the question is, okay, now that you have 2.5, now that we've established this principle, it's a good principle. It's going to allow you to achieve success consistently over time. But the thing is, that's still hard. That's even hard. Going from 2 hours to 2.5 hours, that is not an easy task because you're still going to have to fight against your animalistic impulses. And the question is, what do you do about that? The answer lies in The Dark Knight. So it starts with this figure, Alfred, right? Alfred, we've established in the last movie, he's the figure of the unconscious. He's the figure of the conscience, The conscience, obviously, is like the little voice that exists in the back of your head that tells you to do the good things, The angel on your shoulder. He's the representation of that in Batman's life. Think about it, right? He has no influence on anything, right? He never speaks to anyone. All he does is really just deliver drinks and just sort of like have conversations. He doesn't really have any influence on anything. The only thing he does is talk to Batman. And that's exactly what a conscience is. A conscience is literally inside of your head. All it does is speak to you. So he's a representation of the conscience, and they're asking the question, what do I do about this? Right? I'm having this Joker character who wants to destroy everything. I'm sitting at an unsatisfactory level of achievement, right? And I want to go higher. What? And there's this thing that's getting in the way. The question is, what do I do about that? And so they're having this conversation, and Batman says, or Bruce Wayne says, criminals aren't complicated, Alfred. The Joker, you just have to find his motive, you just have to figure out who he is, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And Alfred says, no. Listen, there's a little bit more than that, and he really he explains the Joker character in the way that I explained it, right? Like, I don't think I need to go too deep into it, but he gives the story of somebody the guy in the forest who just wants to watch the world burn, right? He just wants to destroy everything. He just wants to get rid of everything. And you think about the Joker, right? The Joker has no backstory, no logic. Like, there's nothing to him. We have no idea who he is or what he does, and that's the point. He just wants to destroy. He's not a person. He's let's get that straight. He's literally not a person. He literally just wants to destroy. He's just a figure of our imagination, or a figure of destruction. That's it. So now, okay, now we get into the solution, right? So they ask the question, what do I do about this, right? Bruce Wayne asked the question, okay, I don't know what to do, right? This person wants to tear down the structures that we have. Alfred says, you must endure. Endure is the answer. And to give you an explanation of the best way of doing it is to explain it by a story. So I'm sure everybody's heard of the story of the Odyssey, right? The Odyssey is one of the great mythological stories of Western civilization, and there was this really great part that existed within it that stuck with me over the years. So there's this idea of the sirens. So the sirens are, obviously Odysseus. So Odysseus goes on he's traveling, right? He sets for sea, and he's trying to achieve a goal. We don't really care about what the goal is. But as he's going on and he's sailing, right, he's with his crew, and they get into the realm of the sirens. The sirens are these ancient sexual mythological creatures. Think of them as like mermaids, but the negative sense of it. So what they do is they lure men at sea who are on some sort of goal, right? Because if you're at sea, you're not there to be at sea. You're there to go somewhere, and they lure men at sea to follow their song into their lair, essentially, and then they kill them. And then they drown them. So their goal is, you imagine, someone's lying on a boat. They're standing in structure, right? They're in this realm of craziness, because whenever you try to go through a goal, right, you're going from one place to another. You're going from starting point to end point A to point B. What lies in the middle of that? Chaos. Lies the place that you don't know, because if you're trying to get to somewhere, then you're going through some unknown place, and you imagine that is the representation of water, because in water you could drown. So now you imagine that you're going from point A to point B, and all that you have is a little boat. And then you have this little tiny boat in this giant ocean of chaos, and you are surrounded by death, because all you have to do is fall off this little structure that you have, and you drown. Now imagine that these sirens are the figures that are going to lure you off your path. They're going to lure you into chaos and they're going to kill you, right? And that is another representation of the Joker, right? That is like a subset. Imagine the Joker as somebody who destroys all structures, and then the sirens are the ones who destroy men through sexual nature, through their sexual nature, right? So what the goal of the sirens, therefore, is chaos. So the question is, Odysseus, he's going through, and he knows, he's ready, right? He knows that he's going to face these sirens, and he knows that if he's going to get from one path to another, he's going to have to go through these sirens. And that's exactly, Dante's Inferno is the same idea, Dante, right? He has to get to heaven. So what does he have to do? He has to go through hell first. And that's a really, really strong idea, right? Because that's exactly what happens in your life, right? You try to achieve a goal. You have to go through hell to get to your goal. Now, Odysseus is essentially going through hell. He's going to have to encounter this beast of pleasure, this beast of the siren. And the question is, what did they do about it? So their solution that they came up with, and I think this is somewhat ingenious. So the sirens, what do? They lure you with their song, right? They sing to you, and hopefully they pull you off their course, and you jump off the boat and you go there. So what did Odysseus do? He made all of his crew, everyone in his crew, he made them cover their ears. He said, hey, listen, you guys can't handle this. I'm the hero here. I'm the captain. I'm going to be the one to endure. And you can imagine the crew is the representation of these two people, right? Ramirez and the guard who just couldn't handle it, who just weren't strong enough to handle the Joker. Actually, it's also another, the fake Batman that got hung, right? These are just the people who can't handle the Joker. What do they do about it? They're just not strong enough, and they just don't do it. So they cover their ears. But Odysseus still has to navigate. So what did Odysseus do? Before they encountered the sirens, he made his crew tie him to the boat. So literally strap him down with rope and tie him down so that he cannot leave. And that's what they did. So, but he didn't cover his ears, right? Think about that. He didn't cover his ears. So his goal was, like Bruce Wayne, to endure, right? Alfred tells Bruce Wayne, endure, Master Wayne. And that's exactly what Odysseus must do. He must go through this treacherous land, right? He must still make progress, right? Because they still must make it through. But he's not going to try anything crazy. He's literally just going to endure. And that was their solution, and it was successful, right? Exactly what they did was they said, okay, for the people who can't handle it, don't handle it. For the people who can handle it, all you have to do is just stick it through. Just try to stick it through. And that's Batman's solution. The question is why, right? And this is the fundamental question. Well, it begs the question, why do we have the Joker in the first place, right? Here's the hope, right? Let me give you the ideal world, and then we'll explain, we'll try to figure out why the ideal world doesn't exist. In the ideal world, you say you're going to go on a diet. So, you say you're going to go on a diet, and you say, okay, I'm going to start eating some more kale, right? Whatever. We won't say kale. We'll say chicken, right? We'll go with the regular example. So you say you're going to start eating some more chicken instead of, we'll say, fried chicken, right? Grilled chicken instead of fried chicken. You say you're going to eat it, and then you just make the change. You just implement it. You say, I'm going to eat more chicken, more grilled chicken. And then what do? You eat more grilled chicken. You never have any impulses to go and eat more fried chicken. You never feel this sense of relapse. You just create a plan and then you follow it. Super simple, right? But the problem here is not creating the plan. We could always create a plan. I could always say, tomorrow I'm going to work 14 hours a day. I'm going to work out. I'm going to read for 6 hours. I'm going to learn. I'm going to do all these amazing things. But executing the plan is, That's the hardest part, and that's the part that we haven't really figured out as humans yet. So the question is why? Why do we fail, and why do we just eventually say, screw it, I'm not going to do it? Why is it, on average, January 12th is the day that most people just give up on their New Year's resolution? Why does this happen? Why is our world not perfect? And the answer relies on something like willpower, right? We have this function of willpower. We have this function of, Jung would call it the ego, right? Carl Jung. He says we have this ego that exists, and you could say, well, they're almost synonymous. So you have this you have the part of you that plans. That's a good way of looking at it. The ego is essentially like the part of you that plans and also the part of you that acts. Oops, 1 second. Okay. So you have the ego, you have the part of you, it's the part of you that plans and the part of you that acts willfully. That's a good way of saying it, because you think about it, right? You spend 3 hours watching TV, and you ask, often we ask, wait a second, I really didn't want to do that. Like I wanted to do that, but it wasn't the part of me that wanted to do it. That sort of, I didn't willfully act. I didn't willfully do that. There was a different part of me that wanted to do it. So that's your animalistic part of you acting. But you think of your ego as the thing that acts willfully. So now you say, okay, we have this ego, right? This ego exists. What is its function? What does it do? And Carl Jung says it has one function. It has one primary function, and that function is willpower. Whenever you have an animalistic impulse going against an animalistic impulse going against your ego, going against willpower, your willpower is going to be the thing that fights, and your willpower is going to be the thing that overcomes the animalistic impulse. And this is something that we know, right? You try to take a child, right? A child is extremely undisciplined, right? And since they're incredibly undisciplined, what do? You have to try to make them act willfully in a manner that is against their impulses, against their, we'll say, impulse to play, impulse to be aggressive, impulse to fight, all these, impulse to be angry, right? That's the terrible twos. You have to make them fight their animal impulses and hopefully win out, right? Hopefully win out. Now, that's the function of willpower. The only problem with willpower is that it is so finite. It's not infinite. Like, we can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you can't just will your way through it. Yeah, right? Like, that's why for about the first week, right, things are going really well. That's why in the beginning, the grilled chicken it just goes down. Like, it's really not that much of a problem. But then after a while, it just, the chicken gets old, and going to the gym gets tough, and you really don't want to get up early, and you really don't want to get up. All these problems are happening. It's because your ego, your willpower, is depleting. And, well, that's the fundamental problem that we have. The fundamental problem is we have this structure of the ego, but it's so bad. Like, we're so bad at being able to let it move on throughout. And that's why people like Moana, the story of Moana, says maybe you shouldn't even fight it. Maybe one of the solutions is don't even fight it. Just sort of work with your animalistic impulses and manifest them in a better way instead of using your ego to fight it. Batman says, but wait a second. Even if you do that, even if you try to work with your impulses, you're still going to have to go through this phase of willpower. You're still going to have to try to willpower your way past the Joker, because you're going to have to fight your impulses. And that's the meaning behind endure. That's what Batman does in this movie. He says, okay, you notice that at the end of the movie, Batman fails, right? Harvey Dent turns into a bad guy, right? Rachel dies. Everybody tells lies to each other, right? That was when Alfred hides the letter from Bruce Wayne, and also, he sacrifices his principles by by spying on everyone in the city, right? Batman fails in this movie, but he endured, right? He kept most of his relevant principles, and he didn't give in to the Joker's demands, right? He didn't give in to his animalistic impulses. And that's all that we care about. That's exactly what the meaning behind Odysseus tying himself to the boat is. It's like he didn't achieve any progress. He didn't get any further than he was before. Or maybe a little bit further, right? He got past, the only thing that he did, right? The only thing that Odysseus did was get past the sirens. That's it. The only thing that Batman does in this movie is move past the Joker. He just endures. And that's the equivalent of Odysseus tying himself to the boat and just handling it. There's this book that I read. It's by Seth Godin. I actually have it right here. It's one of my favorite books. It's called The Dip. And what it says is, you're to imagine, in the beginning, whenever you try to achieve a goal, you have this instant spurt of motivation, right? And it feels good. Like, it really does. It feels good to say, I'm going to start going to the gym. It feels really good to say, I'm going to improve myself, and I'm going to achieve a goal. And that's your ego talking. That's your willpower, right? That's you consciously creating a plan. Now, the problem is your willpower depletes, your ego depletes, and this is actually a psychological concept called ego depletion. And then you're stuck in this idea called the dip. And that's the representation of the Joker. Seth Godin's advice, right? Obviously, he wrote a whole book on it. His advice is to lean into the dip. That's what he says. He says the goal is to literally, well, first of all, he gives a bunch of strategies to endure. One of the strategies that I use that's really, really successful is I use this idea of streaks. So, for example, I wanted to do this lecture series, and I want to do it every single day. So I said, I'm going to put an X every single day that I do it. And after about 5 days, I have 5 X's there in my little journal. And I say, wow, this feels really good. I've done it for 5 days in a row. And then you say, wait a second, I really don't want to break this streak. That's the concept of Snapchat streaks. You say, I really don't want to break this streak. It feels really good to say that I've done this for 5 days in a row. And I was able to do it for, I think, 60 days in a row. Something like that for the lectures. So, what is that strategy? That strategy that I use, that's not a working with the unconscious. That's not a crazy, progressive strategy that pushes me into the stratosphere. That's just some way to endure the struggle of going through, we'll say, maybe day 7 to day 21. Because those days are tough. Those days are not easy. And every single time I try to establish a goal, I know that day 7 to day 21 are going to be the most difficult. And all I have to do is endure. All I have to do, I don't have to do an amazing lecture. It doesn't have to be the greatest lecture in my life. I could even take the lecture and just throw it out and say this wasn't that good. All I have to do is push through day 7 to 21. And then by the time that I hit 21 or 28 or something like that, it's going to be better. And I've made it through this crappy part. That's the idea of the endure. So it says, okay, and this is the fundamental principle. So you establish a goal, you establish a principle. There's some force that's acting within you to say, is this principle really worth it? Are you really going to push through, and do you really want to go against your animalistic impulses? Because think about it, nature is really conservative. Evolution is really conservative. Anytime you break against your animal impulses, you're taking a risk. So, this is your nature. Whenever this dip, right, is your nature. This Joker character is your nature saying, wait a second, do you really, really want to do this? Do you really, really want to establish this plan? And then the Joker is going to do every single thing that he possibly can to try to break apart that plan. And, well, what is the answer? Therefore, stick to the principle. If you really want to do it, stick to the principle and endure. Don't try to do anything crazy, just endure. And this is one of the fundamental principles that I've learned over my life. I've found that whenever I try to do a goal, right, some sort of big goal, so let's say establishing this lecture series, actually no, we'll make it a relevant example. So start reading, right, when I really wanted to start reading. If it required willpower, that was my principle. If it required willpower, I'm only going to work on one thing at a time. Because, I wanted to fix my sleep schedule. I wanted to establish a reading habit. I want to start a lecture series. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do like 4 different things. But I said, no. Because I've learned over the past, this is just through my personal experience, I've learned that if I try to do 3 things, I'm going to end up with 0. But if I try to do 1 and I really, really stick through it, then all my willpower, all my ego is going to be devoted to that one thing. And I can endure. I could do that. That's something I could handle. But I can't do 3. I just physically can't do 3. For the people who can do 3, good for you, but I just can't. So, and that's the idea in Moana, right? So this is the integration of the 2 ideas, and this is why I think this is the perfect way of handling, we'll say, goals in general, right? So Moana would tell me, don't do 3, do 1. Because if you're working with 3, then you're fighting your animalistic impulses too much. You're causing too much of a revolution here, that your ego, that your willpower, which is the representation of this little Maui figure, right, this little hero, just can't handle. It just can't do it. But then once you bring it down to the easiest thing possible, you get one goal that's really important to you that you could devote all your willpower to, then you must endure. Then, this is what Batman would say, says you just, you got to use your willpower, you got to use your ego to really push through and stick to your principles.